April 16th, 1945. A sunny spring morning in central Germany. The war was ending. On the main road leading out of the city of Weimar, a strange procession appeared. Hundreds of civilians marched in a long line. Men wore expensive tailored suits and felt fedora hats. Women wore fur coats, bright red lipstick, and high-heeled shoes. These people were chatting and smiling. Some were laughing. The footage shows a scene resembling a crowd heading to a garden party or the opera. They were the elite of Weimar, the wealthy, the educated, the cultural aristocracy of the Third Reich. But they were not going to a social event. Why were the socialites of Weimar marching? At first glance, a festive parade, but in reality, a forced confrontation with the truth. They were marching at gunpoint. Flanking the column on both sides were American soldiers. The Americans were grim-faced and covered in field dust. Their fingers rested on the triggers of their M1 Garand rifles. The soldiers did not smile. They were escorting these citizens 5 miles up a hill called the Ettersberg. They were heading toward a destination the citizens claimed they had never heard of. A place called Buchenwald. Events accelerated. The citizens complained as they walked the dusty path. They called the march an outrage. They looked at their polished shoes and complained about the dirt. To them, this was a propaganda stunt. They believed the American army was exaggerating the facts. They believed they were innocent. There was no mistake. The soldiers kept them moving. The sound of heavy boots on gravel filled the air. The smell of pine trees mixed with something metallic and foul blowing from the top of the hill. The Americans knew what was waiting behind the gates. The citizens of Weimar were about to see it for themselves. General George Patton had ordered this. He wanted the witnesses to see the crime. The march continued upward. The smiles began to fade as the first smell of the chimneys reached the fur coats. Thus began the confrontation. April 11th, 1945. General George S. Patton arrived at the gates of Buchenwald. He did not look away. He walked past the iron gates and saw the ovens. He saw the piles of clothes and the human remains. He saw the private zoo the SS guards built for their own amusement, where animals were fed while prisoners starved to death feet away. Patton reached a conclusion. The innocence of the nearby city of Weimar was a lie. He decided to shatter that lie. He wanted to take the most sophisticated people in Germany and rub their noses in the sewage of their own history. Did the citizens claim they didn't know? Patton had a simple answer. He ordered a tour. This is the story of the Parade of Shame. It is the record of how the cultural capital of Germany became the neighbor of hell. It marks the exact moment the smiles vanished from the faces of the German elite. To understand the horror of Buchenwald, one must first look at the beauty of Weimar. Why was this city different? It was the intellectual soul of the nation. This was the city of Goethe and Schiller. It was the birthplace of the Bauhaus movement. The streets were lined with libraries, theaters, and manicured parks. The residents considered themselves the pinnacle of European civilization. They spent their evenings listening to Beethoven. They spent their mornings reading philosophy. But 5 miles away, a different reality existed. A scenic, tree-lined road led directly from the city center to a factory of death. Buchenwald concentration camp opened in 1937. For 8 years, it operated in plain sight. The logistics of mass murder were woven into the fabric of daily life. The camera records the layout. SS officers lived in suburban villas. Their wives shopped in Weimar's boutiques. They sat in the same concert halls as the local professors. When the wind shifted, the smoke from the crematorium floated over the city. When the sun set, white ash settled on the windowsills of expensive homes. The locals saw the smoke. They smelled the air. They watched the prisoner transports pass through the streets. Yet, they maintained a wall of silence. Patton saw the silence. He decided to break it. The general issued a direct command to his officers. Every able-bodied citizen of Weimar was to be rounded up. They were not going to a trial. They were going on a march. The footage shows the line of civilians, men in suits, women in fur coats. They were marched up the hill toward the barbed wire. Patton ensured there was no looking away. This was the end of their denial. The city of poets was now the city of witnesses. April 11, 1945. The United States Third Army arrived at the gates of Buchenwald. When General Patton's tanks rolled into the area, the SS guards did not fight. They dropped their weapons and fled into the woods. Inside the wire, the prisoners who could still stand took control of the watchtowers. Patton arrived at the camp a few days later. He was a veteran of the Great War. He had already seen the horrors at Ohrdruf. He believed he was prepared for anything. He was wrong. Buchenwald was massive. It was a city of rot. 20,000 prisoners remained inside the barracks. The footage shows them clearly. Walking skeletons, men weighing 60 pounds, children with hollow eyes who had forgotten how to smile. Patton walked through the main gates. He stopped in the central courtyard. In the frame, a pile of bodies. There were hundreds of them. They were stacked like firewood against the brick walls, naked, yellow-skinned, eyes frozen open. At first glance, Patton was the toughest man in the army. They called him Old Blood and Guts. But in reality, this sight broke him. He stepped away from the pile. He took out his diary and wrote a single entry. He stated he had never felt so sick in his life. He wrote, "This is not war. This is madness." Events shifted to the perimeter. Patton looked past the barbed wire at the German civilians in the nearby fields. The town of Weimar was only a few miles away. The residents were plowing their land. Women were hanging laundry on lines. They moved with calm, rhythmic motions. The smell of death was a physical wall. It was so thick the American soldiers were vomiting into the dirt. Yet the civilians acted as if the air was clear. Patton turned to the captured camp commander. He pointed toward the town. He asked if the people in that valley knew what was happening inside these walls. The commander gave a short reply. He claimed the citizens knew nothing. When the Americans... They are lying. General George S. Patton did not raise his voice, but his face turned a deep, aggressive red. He slammed his riding crop against his leather boot. The sound echoed like a pistol shot in the room. He turned to the provost marshal and gave an order unique in the history of modern warfare. He did not want the mayor or the low-level officials. He wanted the elite. Patton ordered his military police to enter the city of Weimar immediately. He demanded the wealthiest citizens, the professors, the lawyers, and the successful businessmen. He specifically included the wives of the local Nazi politicians. The target number was exactly 1,000 people. Why did Patton want the civilians? It was not for an interrogation. It was for a confrontation with a reality they claimed did not exist. The MPS moved into the city streets. They did not use subtle tactics. They knocked on the doors of grand stone villas and entered high-end shops. They gave the same instruction to every person on the list. Put on your coats. You're going for a walk. The MPs told them that General Patton invited them to visit their neighbors. Confusion spread through the German ranks. Some civilians were indignant. One man stood his ground and shouted that he was a doctor and could not be ordered around. The MP responded without words. He simply leveled his rifle at the doctor's chest. The man started walking. The footage shows a strange sight. A column of 1,000 well-dressed civilians marched slowly up the hill. They wore furs, wool coats, and polished shoes. American jeeps drove alongside the column to prevent anyone from breaking rank. The mood was surprisingly light. The Germans chatted with each other. Women checked their reflections and fixed their hair. They treated the march as a minor inconvenience or a strange American game. They even smiled for the cameras. But this was only the beginning. The march lasted 2 hours. As the group approached the top of Ettersberg Hill, the talking stopped. The wind shifted. A specific smell hit the column. It was not just the scent of rotting flesh. It was the smell of old industrial death. It was stale, heavy, and greasy. The air felt thick. The women stopped smiling. Handkerchiefs came out. They pulled perfumed scarves from their pockets and pressed them against their faces. They tried to block the air, but the smell stuck to the back of their throats. People tried to slow down or turn away. The MPs pushed them forward with the butts of their rifles. There was no stopping. The column reached the main entrance. In the frame, the famous Iron Gate of Buchenwald. Events accelerated. There was no turning back now. April 16, 1945. The iron gates of Buchenwald stood open. Above the entrance, a wrought iron inscription read, Jedem das Seine, To each his own. This was a calculated Nazi mockery. 1,000 German civilians from Weimar marched through that gate. They stepped directly into a factory of death. The first sight stopped the column. Thousands of prisoners stood behind electrified barbed wire. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply watched. These were the men the townspeople claimed never existed. The survivors looked at the heavy fur coats and tailored suits of the visitors. Their eyes were hollow. No one screamed. No one attacked. The silence of the prisoners was heavier than any physical blow. American soldiers formed a tight cordon. They used rifles to keep the line moving. The destination was the crematorium. In the center of the courtyard sat a wooden trailer. It was overloaded. Naked, emaciated bodies were piled 6 feet high. Limbs were tangled in impossible angles. Skin stretched tight over bone. Mouths remained frozen in silent screams. The smell of decay hit the crowd. The civilians stopped dead. Blood drained from their faces. One woman in a fur coat gripped her throat. Her knees buckled. She began to shake violently before a scream broke the silence. She collapsed face first into the black mud. An American military police officer stepped forward. He did not offer a hand. He did not show pity. Instead, he nudged her with the toe of his boot. He told her to get up. He told her she had seen nothing yet. At first glance, a group of horrified neighbors.